We've played 4 to 5 hours of Resident Evil 7 in preview form. My name is James from GamesRadar, and here to tell me all about that hands-on time is Leon Hurley.
Hello!
So Leon, the fun of Resident Evil is experiencing the scares and revelations for yourself. So we're going to keep this as spoiler-free as we can, but there is new footage and details in here that you might not want to see or hear if you're avoiding everything. Having said that though, what are your first impressions?
It's really good. Like, I played about 4 or 5 hours. It's probably, even just at the preview stage of what I played, one of my favourite things I've played this year. It would be a good horror game even without the Resi name. And the fact it's a good horror game after sort of 5 and 6, where it was all, you know, monster action, camp, city stuff, like, it's still a good horror game, so it manages to undo almost sort of the damage of Resi 5 and 6.
So what we're seeing here is edited highlights from what you played, both in and out of VR, captured on PS4.
Yes, yeah, played it in both. Yeah, VR's awful, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Awful in a good way, though.
Awful in a good way, yeah.
So where does this section of the game take place, and what's going on?
So it's about an hour into the game. Again, for spoilers, Capcom are really, really tight on spoilers, so I have no idea what happened in that hour to get me to where I am. One thing you notice early on is that Ethan's hand has been cut off and stapled back on, so something weird is happening there. But yeah, so you're sat around a table with the Bakers. They're the mad sort of Killbilly family. They're trying to feed you chicken guts by prying your jaw open with a knife. That's horrible. But then you escape. They wander off. There's a doorbell ringing, and you escape, and it gets into kind of how this new Resi plays in first person, where you're sort of creeping around parts of the house. There's usually one of the Bakers maybe around trying to catch you. So it's a bit like Alien Isolation and a bit sort of Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers. You're creeping around. Right at the beginning, you have to find a key to open a trapdoor. It's quite a small area. Jack's wandering around with a shovel. If he catches you, he will kill you eventually. You can basically kind of shoot him and stun him and run away and hide. But that's kind of the main thing from what I've played, is you'll have areas where you're on your own and you're trying to solve a puzzle or find some pieces. You'll have areas where they're there trying to sort of catch you. And it's very, very Resi. Like, it's ridiculous. It's in first person, but it's so familiar as a Resi game. You have the item chests, you're juggling your gear around, trying to fit it in a small grid. You have the safe rooms that play little warbly tunes, and it has like a tape player instead of a typewriter to save on. It has the chest that you store your gear in, and you go in there, and as soon as you hear the music, you know you're safe. You know you found a safe place for a little while. So even in first person, it feels ridiculously like a Resi game. You have this sort of spooky mansion. It really feels like a return to the original series values.
So the core of the game, from what you've played so far, is basically hiding and solving puzzles around this mansion.
Yes, and there is combat. You get a gun, you get a shotgun, you get this weird sort of flamethrower that looks like a kind of a hairspray canister on a bike handlebar. But with the Bakers, they're pretty resistant. They'll kind of go down, but they'll get back up. So it's more of a delay or a distraction. There is a new monster though, and that's called the Molded. And there are these sort of slimy kind of black growths on the wall, and these molded creatures kind of come out of it, and those you can fight and kill. Like, early on I counted like a couple, like one at a time, a few times, and they take a lot of bullets. If you don't have any special ammo or better ammo, you can craft, if you find gunpowder, you can craft like more powerful bullets, and I found like a gunpowder bullet would be a single headshot would take them down. Later on, at one point you go into a room and it's full of them, and that's like a classic kind of Resi zombie moment where you're like, I can't fight this, and you just run through them and just flail like them out the way and get out the door and just don't go back in that room for a while. So there is actual kind of combat, but most of what I played was trying to get away from Jack, trying to get away from Magritte, trying to sort of find things to solve puzzles. And the puzzles are very Resi. There's like dog head medallions you have to find, there's a cow thing you have to find. It's all that classic kind of animal shapes and weird, like at one point you solve a puzzle and Ethan kind of goes like, who builds this shit? Because it really plays up to the sort of the silly old Resi kind of puzzles, but knowingly so.
Okay, so going back to VR for a moment, how does that compare to playing it on a TV? Is there any visual difference at all?
It pulls in the darkness a little bit more, so things fall into shadow a little bit closer, which just makes it, I think, more claustrophobic and makes it more oppressive. And I played a section that I'd already played before, which I was quite glad about, because I didn't want to I thought if I play a section I hadn't played before, it's going to be really bad. But even knowing what was coming, it was still really scary. So yeah, pulls in the shadows. You look to aim now, so wherever you're looking is a white dot, and that's where your gun goes, which you'd think would sort of make combat a little more unbalanced, because you just look at something's head and pull a trigger, but it actually kind of, you end up sort of flailing a bit and flapping, and you get sort of panicky, and it still is, combat is still fraught and desperate. But the bit I played was let's say a monster sort of regenerating, doing horrible things, bursts through a door, grabs you by the throat and lifts you up so you can see parts of them growing back. And it's horrible. Like, as soon as his hand goes for your throat and lifts you up, I was sort of trying to bat the hand away. Like, it felt like it was on my throat. So it's really unpleasant, really nasty. I dread to think what playing some of it without knowing what's coming would feel like. And there's some bits I played on the TV where I screamed and flinched that in VR, I'd have, God knows what would have happened.
Let's talk locations for a bit, because it's not all set in one house, right? It's more of an estate.
Yeah, the way the environment works is really interesting. So you start off in this really small little area. It's literally a corridor and 2 rooms, and that's when you first have to sort of escape Jack. And I say this is an hour in, so I don't know whether I've just arrived in the house or what. But yeah, so you go through there and you unlock a door, and then that unlocks another bit of the house, and you explore around there. You have to solve a puzzle, and that unlocks another bit of the house. And then after a little while, you get outside into a little area with a trailer, and the trailer is a safe room. And this almost kind of becomes a hub. So as you explore, you're unlocking new areas, but they all link back on each other, so you're sort of expanding and growing the playable space. It's not like you play a level, you move on, you play another level, you move on. You keep kind of going back. Like, at one point I'd gone into another building on the grounds. It was another house on the grounds, and I needed more ammo, I needed more gear, and I'd found some extra keys, so I went back and sort of retraced my steps and re-explored some areas and got some more stuff that I hadn't been able to reach previously. And it works really well with the horror stuff, because it doesn't feel like you're backtracking. It feels like you're kind of reusing the space, and it does some clever things as well, where, you know, you've been walking down a corridor several times, so obviously it's safe.
So far, they are all joined up. Like, in a way, you can go from one bit to the next, right?
Yes, yeah. You don't. It doesn't like have a loading screen and you just appear somewhere. You unlock a new area, you move on to a new space, and you can see, like in some places, you can see that, well, there's clearly a door here that is important that I can't do anything with. There's one that has like some switches, and it obviously looks like there's a couple of like key cards or something, but you know that that's not available yet. But at some point, you'll open up a new wing of the mansion, and it'll become a new part of the playable space you're in.
Classic Resi, really.
Yeah.
Okay, so far so good then.
No, I really enjoyed it. Like, it genuinely is. I was thinking about this. It is one of my favourite things I've played all year, even just as a 4 or 5 hour demo, because it is sort of, it does a thing that works really well with horror, where it's both familiar and unpredictable. You're kind of like, both in terms of being in the house and being in Resident Evil, you're like, I know this place, but something's wrong, and you don't quite know what's coming. The sort of the first person stuff, and the new thing they're doing with the enemies, like the Bakers being like, the Bakers are more of a prominent character than you are, because obviously in first person you're sort of non-existent. So they're all the character in a game. So it makes it unpredictable and sort of uncertain, which it needs. You know, you don't have that kind of like, I know how this game works, I know how the scares work, because you don't quite know what it's going to do next.
Great, thanks Leon. Resident Evil is out January 24th, but keep your eye on the channel, because we might have some more news coming your way very soon. After all, we have been promised a 3rd tape in early December. So don't forget to subscribe for more gaming news, reviews, previews and features right here on GamesRadar Plus.
You ain't getting away! Ah!